very famous case in English law, specifically English company law, is Salomon and A. Salomon and Co. Limited, 1897, so let's talk about it. So this all starts back in the 1890s when a leather boot and shoe manufacturer, Aaron Salomon, who was operating as a sole trader initially, decides to incorporate his business, forming A. Salomon and Co. Limited. So in this corporation, Mr. Salomon himself was the majority shareholder. There were 20,007 shares altogether. He owned 20,001 of them, and then his wife and 5 children owned 1 share each. This is just because at the time you had to have a minimum of 7 shareholders to meet the legal requirement. So after this incorporation, the company, A. Salomon and Co. Limited, decided to purchase Mr. Salomon's sole trader for £39,000. £10,000 of that was paid in a specific type of secure loan called debentures. Also, I know it's a little bit confusing when I say the company purchased the business because obviously you would think they were the same thing, but let me just explain. So like I said beforehand, he was a sole trader. He was operating as a sole trader, and when you are operating as a sole trader, you and your business are one thing, like you are one legal entity. This means that if his business runs into debt, he is also in debt. Him and his business were one, but when he formed the actual corporation, A. Salomon and Co. Limited, that was a separate entity to him and his original business. So he essentially bought himself, except we're actually thinking of the company as a separate entity, a separate person. It's nothing to do with him as a person, and that's actually going to be quite an important aspect of this case. Anyway, shortly after, the company ended up running into financial difficulties and then eventually went into liquidation. AKA, all of its assets were going to be sold to pay its debts, and then after this is all done, the company will no longer exist. Now again, just to emphasize, when a company is incorporated, it is seen as a separate legal entity to the person who owns it or owns the majority shares of it. This means for any debt that it has, the person who owns the majority shares is not responsible. He does not have to pay out of his own personal assets, only the company's assets, and the company pays for its debts itself. The person overseeing the liquidation, the liquidator, however, thought very differently of this and said that that company was just a mere facade for Mr. Salomon and that he should be personally responsible for all of its debts and liabilities. Both the High Court and the Court of Appeal ruled in the liquidator's favour, arguing that yes, it was actually a complete sham because obviously remember, he was a sole trader first and then he incorporated this company and then bought himself, etc. They both stated that it was merely an extension of himself and that he abused the whole process of corporate incorporation, and thus he should be personally liable and responsible for all of its liabilities. The House of Lords, however, today would be the UK Supreme Court, overturned both of these courts' decisions and said otherwise. They held that the second it was legally formed, he was not in any way personally liable for any of its debts other than the investments and the shares that he held himself. This case was hugely impactful in so many ways, but one of the most significant impacts was the establishment of the corporate veil doctrine. This meant that going forward, courts would generally respect the separate identities of companies and their shareholders, and that it will not hold shareholders personally liable for the company's actions and liabilities unless there was clear evidence of misuse or fraud. And that is the case of Salomon and A. Salomon and Co. Limited, 1897.